Tiffany. It's lovely to have you here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, you have one of the most harrowing and inspirational endometriosis stories because it wasn't just endo for you. It was so many things that happened alongside of it, from challenges during pregnancy to challenges postpartum to now up into this point that you're in your life right now. So as I always like to say, this is your journey and your story to tell. It isn't mine. So if you'd like to begin about once you got your endometriosis diagnosis, what were some of the things that followed after for you?
Sure, absolutely. And again, thank you so much for having me. So I guess like so many other people that have endometriosis that have gone through this journey, it started very young for me. Um, it started with very bad headaches when I was 9. I was diagnosed with migraine headaches at 9 years old and bad stomach issues where a lot of times with the migraines, it would correlate with very bad, gastrointestinal stuff that would go along with it. And they just put it off for years and years. I actually didn't formally get diagnosed until I was 21. But I was in and out of the hospital all those years in between emergency rooms, ruptured cysts. I had irregular periods. They had me on birth control at 12 years old, very young, just starting to regulate things, passing out all the time, a lot of horrible symptoms as a teenager. It was really rough. The bad anxiety, I would actually get chest flutters. I would have like heart flutters. Lots of things happened. And my first surgery, my first laparoscopy, they actually said I didn't have it. They said I was loaded with scar tissue, but not endometriosis. I know. And I was 19 and I had never had any surgeries or anything to even have scar tissue. So it didn't really make any sense to me. But it is something that's very common in my family. I do have a lot of women in my family that have it. So I was a little educated on the disease very young, which actually was in my favor because I was able to push forward until I did get more answers and not just accept whatever the doctors told me. At 21, they finally did find it, but just like a lot of times back then, they would say, "We cleaned you up. You're all good. It's gone. You're fine." And after many years of lots and lots of different hormonal drugs, I tried probably every single one that's out there on the market. All of the birth control shots, Lupron, the Depo-Provera, patches, IUDs, everything that was there. Nothing was ever working. It just seemed to be that I was always in pain, always doubled over, still having like fainting spells, lots of things that persisted. I had 3 surgeries before I was 25, and they were just straight laparoscopies, just ablation.
Oh.
And they told me that I could not have children. Well, it was a flip-flop. When I was a teenager, one of the doctors was so kind to tell me that because I was Latina, I would have no problem getting pregnant, and that I should just have children very young because then my endometriosis would go away. So that was first. And yeah. And then when I hit about 23 and I was still persistently having these issues, they said, you're never going to be able to have children. For you to continuously be, having these issues all the time, it's just not going to happen. So my husband and I, we decided to just go off all medications and leave it up to God, see what happens. And I was very lucky that I did actually get pregnant a few months after going off of all medications. But with that first pregnancy, everything was fine. And I actually was in remission, so they would call it, for a few years. I felt a lot better. I did have some pain here and there, but it was nothing. I felt like, wow, maybe I am cured, just like they said. Great. So we tried for another baby. And with that second one, it was a really horrible pregnancy. I was on bed rest for the entire pregnancy. I went into actual full-blown labor at 23 weeks. And I had to be hospitalized. They had to stop the labor. They kept me there for 10 days. And that just continued throughout the pregnancy. I was on all kinds of medications, bed rest. I had a machine hooked up to me. And I mean, luckily my son made it to 36 weeks. Yeah, 36 weeks. Yep. And he was fine. And, everything was good. Thank God. But what they found out was that I had severe adenomyosis, and that the pregnancy was actually dispelling because my uterus was so filled with tissue and just clogged up basically that it was trying to reject the pregnancy. So I had C-sections both times, and they immediately scheduled me. They didn't do it at the time. I guess they couldn't do it at the same time. They couldn't just take the uterus right there. So I had to wait a few months for recovery from the C-section. And then I went in and they actually took my uterus, which at that time I was also told, you're cured. Your endometriosis is gone. It was in your uterus. It's adenomyosis. You're going to be fine, which was not the case. And from that point on, I had 10 surgeries in 10 years, back to back.
I mean, that's so traumatizing.
It was a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. And it's also like your body and your brain almost has to dissociate in so many ways, because you're just not sure when your body's gonna decide to go left on you.
It's really hard because, especially as like a new mom, I had toddlers at home and I was so sick all the time. Like I just couldn't move. The pain is unbearable. And I mean, I know you see posts all the time and you see all these things about like to describe what endo pain feels like. I don't think there really is any description out there to describe what that feels like, because it's different for everybody, first of all, and it can be in so many different areas of your body, aside from just the actual pain, the exhaustion, the emotional distress that it takes on you, and your hormones are all over the place most of the time too. That's like, you don't know, am I depressed? Am I, is something wrong with me? Am I sick? You don't know what's going on. And that's so stressful all the time.
Like you have to be responsible for your own diagnosis a lot of
Right.
the time as well, where you're trying to piece together, is this endo? Is this something else? Who do I go see? Where do I go? And I as someone who has endometriosis many times feels like it's my responsibility to figure it out before I go see a doctor.
Right.
I don't want to burden them with that. And I'm so afraid of being told that it's in my head or I'm crazy, or
Yeah,
that
because we all have been so many times.
And
Yeah.
it stays with you. It's like, I know I'm
Absolutely does.
but I'm so afraid of what if I'm wrong? What if I don't? Maybe it's just something weird or whatever. And I go to the doctor and he's like, you wasted my time. Oh, now I'm going to mark you down as somebody who cries wolf. And like
Yeah.
that's the fear I have. So I feel like for many of us, we allow our symptoms to get to a fever pitch and get so bad until we're unable to almost not function, that's when we seek the help. And then it's like an emergency situation.
Absolutely. And that's why so many of us end up in the ER. I can't even tell you the amount of times that I've been in the ER. I mean, in the hundreds, it has to be, because for sometimes it would be more than once in a month I would end up there, because it's just so unbearable. And then of course, when you're a repeat customer, they think that you're drug seeking or that, you're just there for whatever reason. And then they brush you off.
Want to hang out. You want to hang out.
Right. Like, this is what I really want to do, and to be honest with you, most of us that have endo nowadays, doctors are a lot more likely to just pretty much give out whatever medications, I feel like. And if we really were drug seekers, we'd be on a list this long of pain meds, and all these things. And none of us want to be, because who wants to live like that? None of us want to be. No. And I think it's funny that we get labeled that way, whereas more women with endo, I feel like, are more afraid to take that type of medication and are less likely to take it because the pain is constant all the time, that you wait until it gets to a point that you can't even move to take it, just to help a little bit. Because if you just took it for regular pain, when it gets to that level of bad pain, it's not going to work.
Right.
And right. I don't think that people understand that,
And there's also side effects with all those pain pills.
There's so many things that they drug us with so many different things to try to treat this symptom or that symptom. And when you're that desperate, you'll try pretty much, anything, like, oh, the doctor says that this is going to, help this. And then that leads to side effects that have now this symptom persists and this one comes up. And it's just a domino effect that just continues throughout your entire life until before you know it, you look back and say, wow, I can't believe, how did I get here? How did this happen? I'm at a point right now in my 40s, and I do feel a lot better. My symptoms are kind of manageable at the moment. I know at any time things could go back to the way they were. But it's really hard at this point when you get, I think women, when they hit 40, kind of go through a mental thing as it is. And looking back on the last 20 years of my life, I feel robbed a little bit. I look back and it's really hard sometimes to look back and see how much I missed out on, just how much of a fog I was in for so long. Just living with this, people just don't understand the toll that it really takes on you, both not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, it affects every single area of your life. And I just don't understand how still we're having to fight and explain ourselves. Why is this still a thing? I don't get it.
Yeah, it is still a thing. It is still a fight. I feel like when you look at the number of people with uteruses that are affected with endometriosis, 1 in 10, and that's people who have been diagnosed. We know that number is probably larger.
I'm sure.
Estimated 200 million globally in the world. Is redundant, but you get what I mean. 200 million in the world. And you think that there's a small group of initiatives. There's a small group of people like you, like me, the people watching Endo TV, that are all fighting for ourselves as individuals and as a collective. But it shouldn't have to be this way when so many people are impacted by this disease. There isn't an easy cure. Surgeries are expensive. They're disruptive. 6 to 8 weeks recovery. A lot of things can go wrong in a surgery, even in the best, most
absolutely.
Scar tissue happens from every surgery you have, which can also cause adhesions and pain. The pills are also expensive. They're not always covered by insurance. And with my experience, birth control is a no-go for me. It's a short-term Band-Aid, but then it comes with other things that
absolutely.
I'm just like, these side effects don't make me feel good.
No.
We feel worse. Yes, it's curbing the issue at hand to keep it away, but yeah, I don't think I want this life.
And I don't think that it's really talked about enough, the long-term effects of all the birth control and all the different hormone options that are there. Because I truly believe a lot of us that end up with a lot of these autoimmune issues later on, or maybe we had them all along, but it takes so long to get diagnosed. I do think a lot of them are side effects from all the things we, put into our bodies for so long. Even still now, I have younger family members that I know clearly have endometriosis, younger women in my family, presenting exactly the way that I did, that their mother did, that their grandmother did, because it's so, so prominent in my family. And what are they doing? The doctors are just loading them up with birth controls, these teenagers. They're just giving them, oh, this one's not working. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. And I'm seeing them, go through the emotional things. I'm depressed, or I'm stressed out, or I have anxiety, where they didn't have it before. And when you're playing with someone's hormones like that, you're bound to have these side effects, aside from weight gain, joint pain, fatigue, the different things that go up and down. I don't think that that's really looked at enough for these young women that are being given this option. And I understand why the doctors prescribe it. And I understand, the science behind it of what they're trying to do. But I think even that needs to be looked at for something, something else needs to be done about it, because I think all it does is prolong the inevitable and mask symptoms. And then later on down the line, it causes so many more problems, like birth control. I mean, I was on it for many, many years and all different kinds. And same for me now. I tell everybody, like, if you have the option, try not to, I'm not a doctor, but when my friends come to me, like, they want to put me on this, I'm like, I can't tell you what to go on or what not to go on, but, look into it, do your research before you start taking anything, because I truly do think that a lot of the autoimmune issues I have now are damaged from some of the medications that I was put on. I think anything controlled and done properly might help, correctly. Small doses of things will definitely help if you just need something to manage the symptoms. However, going on these things long-term, I think should really be reevaluated. That's just my opinion. But
that makes a lot of sense. I know we're short for time. You have also had, when you mention your autoimmune issues, you have been diagnosed with lupus and rheumatoid arthritis.
Yes.
which studies have shown that's a very common comorbidity that usually gets diagnosed around 35 for the endometriosis. I wish we had, I would like to go into this with a clinician because it's
Yeah.
really scary.
Mhm.
Endometriosis in itself is a really hard one to live with as a chronic illness. And those two are, I mean, they threaten all the organs. So
Correct.
and it's holistically very damaging, as you know, joints, even to the heart, the lungs, all these vital organs. So for you, when can you just kind of encapsulate like when you realized that it was something more than just, and I don't want to say just endo, but more than endo?
Right. I mean, I always kind of suspected it was something more. I've been diagnosed with so many things: fibromyalgia, Hashimoto's, Graves' disease, uh, everything, every autoimmune disease, pretty much, aside from like MS. I pretty much have been told that I have at some point. They say it's this, they say it's that, they say it's this, and then magically that just goes away. Like, that's not really how it works. So I kind of lost my faith in the doctors when diagnosing those type of things. I personally feel that there's one umbrella autoimmune thing that maybe they haven't even named yet, or they haven't figured out yet. I mean, it took them so long just to figure out endometriosis, things. Lupus is very similar because it's tissue related. So it's very similar to endometriosis. And I think that that's why there's such a correlation. I bet there are a lot more people that have both that don't know either one or the other. And I think the reason why it's so common of why they diagnose it as lupus later on is because a lot of times at that point, many women with endometriosis have already had everything taken out. They've already had surgeries where everything's removed. So now they're not calling it endometriosis anymore. Now they're saying it's affecting other things. And I think it's probably very similar. I think if they started, I'm curious, I would love to do research on this and work with a team of doctors on this. I know there are studies out there on comorbidities, but I think that if they maybe started testing those ANA things much sooner in younger women when they're presenting with a lot of these endo symptoms, I'd be curious to see if it's elevated. Compare the blood work, treat it like you are checking for lupus when they have endo, or, and vice versa, and just see. I would be really curious to know, because I do think that there is a direct correlation with a lot of other autoimmune as well. And I just think it's an inflammatory, I mean, we know this now, it's an inflammatory disease. And if they could just figure out what the cause of that inflammation is right from the beginning, instead of saying we have a slew of autoimmune diseases, it could all just be, this is what it is. And it might be more treatable that way.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's something also for those that have been diagnosed with endometriosis to look into if they're not getting relief. We know that endo and adeno are very hard to treat.
Right.
But if you feel like there's something else going on, to pursue maybe looking into, could this be lupus? Could this be RA?
Yes, especially if there's a lot of joint pain, particularly the fatigue. I mean, we all get fatigue with any autoimmune, but particularly the joint pain. If you're getting any type of like shortness of breath and that kind of situation, that's how I actually got diagnosed finally. I was having shortness of breath and they were looking into different things. And the end result was that it was lupus. RA is it's much easier to diagnose by different markers in your blood. It's much easier to diagnose. Lupus is a lot harder too. But the joint pain is a big one. And the shortness of breath as well. The two things for me that I would say, if you're having that alongside of, if you're already diagnosed with endometriosis, or if you think you have it and you're not getting anywhere with doctors to get diagnosed and you have those things as well, maybe reach out to a rheumatologist and get like a deeper panel of blood work done, or even if your regular physician is willing to do that, just to see what else is going on, a deeper look into it, because all of these things are related. It's all inflammatory.
No, thank you so much, Tiffany, because it's not easy to share your journey. It's not easy to open up to the world and say, I have these things, I've been battling these things. I commend you for your bravery, because it's hard to live with these things, and they're invisible illnesses, and people think you look okay and you're carrying on. And you don't want anybody to know that what's really going on, because you don't want anyone to think that you're not able and
exactly
available, and you don't want it to hurt your interpersonal relationships. You don't want it to hurt your business relationships. You just want to keep trucking along, and you're like, this damn body,
Yeah.
it's just not working.
Yes.
And it's almost like another side job to have to get diagnosed in proper medical treatment. And it's exhausting. It's expensive. I always say you have to be rich to be sick in this world.
It's so true. It's so unfortunate and so true.
Yes, but could easily, I mean, it can bankrupt your spirit without, without
sure.
thinking twice about it, but it can also bankrupt you financially because it is so freaking expensive.
It really is.
To be ill in this country. So, I think you're doing great work with all your
Thank
advocacy
you.
and how you keep fighting the good fight for all those people with endo and adeno and lupus and RA and getting the word out. So thank you again for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much for all the work you're doing as well.